They didn't just misunderstand a people, they erased their religion. No temples, no scriptures, no prayers they could recognize. So they wrote something dangerous into history. They have nothing. But what if the problem was never what they saw, but what they couldn't see? Because what looked like emptiness was something they had no name for. And once you see it, you won't be able to look at history the same way again. There's a version of this story most people have never heard. And once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. When Europeans arrived in North America, they came with a clear idea of what religion should look like. A sacred place, a structured ritual, a clear separation between the spiritual and the everyday world. But what they encountered didn't fit any of those expectations. Because for many Native American communities, spirituality wasn't something you did. It was something you lived. Number one, there was no single religion. When Europeans arrived, they tried to make sense of what they saw by comparing it to their own world. Back home, religion was usually one clear system, one set of beliefs, one main authority, and rules that people followed. So they expected to find the same thing. But they didn't. What they found instead were many different tribes spread across a vast land. And each one had its own way of seeing and understanding life. Every group had its own stories, its own traditions, and its own way of connecting with what they believed in. These ways were not random. They were shaped by where people lived, what they experienced, and what had been passed down to them over time. There wasn't one single religion shared by everyone. There wasn't one book or one set of rules that applied to all. There were many ways of belief, not just one. But to the Europeans, this was hard to understand. They were used to one system that looked the same everywhere. So when they didn't see that, they assumed something was missing. That was the first misunderstanding. Number two, life itself was spiritual. To many Europeans, prayer was something you paused your day to do. You stopped what you were doing, spoke a few words, and then returned to normal life. But for many Native communities, there was no need to stop, because their whole life was already filled with meaning. Every action mattered. Hunting wasn't just about getting food. It was about respect for the animal, for nature, and for the balance of life. Farming wasn't just work. It was working with the earth, not against it. Even simple, everyday things, walking, speaking, gathering with others, were done with care and awareness. Nothing was empty. Nothing was without purpose. There was no clear line between what was spiritual and what was ordinary. Because to them, even the ordinary moments of life were deeply meaningful. It's important to understand, there was never just one way. Native American cultures are incredibly diverse, with hundreds of distinct nations, each carrying its own beliefs and practices. What we're exploring here isn't a single system, but a shared pattern seen across many communities. Number three, prayer didn't always use words. To many Europeans, prayer had a certain look. You spoke words. You followed set patterns. You said the same lines again and again. So when they looked for prayer, they expected to hear it. But many times, they didn't. Instead, they saw silence, or movement, or people singing, or small offerings placed carefully on the ground. And they didn't understand it. Because in many Native traditions, prayer wasn't limited to words. A dance could be a prayer, moving the body with meaning. A song could be a prayer, carrying feeling and intention. Even sitting quietly in nature could be a way of connecting. Nothing had to be spoken out loud. Prayer wasn't just something you said. It was something you showed, something you lived, something you expressed in many different ways. Number four, nature was not separate, it was alive. To many Europeans, nature was something made, something placed there for people to use. But for many Native communities, nature was not separate from life. It was alive, not just in a physical way, but in a deeper sense. Rivers were not just water. They had presence. Animals were not just creatures. They had meaning. Forests, wind, even the land itself, were understood as living parts of the world. This wasn't just a way of speaking. It was how they truly saw reality. And when you live in a world where everything is alive in this way, your behavior changes. You don't treat nature like an object. You show respect. You pay attention. You learn from it. You don't stand above it. You live as part of it. Number five, the goal was balance, not worship. In many European traditions, religion focused on worship. People were taught to obey, to believe, and to follow certain rules. But for many Native communities, the focus was different. It was about balance. Balance between people. Balance between humans and nature. balance between the physical world and the unseen. Life was not just about praising something higher. It was about keeping everything in the right place. So when something went wrong, like sickness, conflict, or hardship, it wasn't always seen as punishment. It was seen as something being out of balance. And the purpose of spiritual practices was not only to give thanks or show devotion. It was to make things right again, to bring back peace, to restore harmony, to return life to the way it was meant to be. Number 6. There were no sacred books, only living memory. Many Europeans relied on written books for their beliefs. These books were seen as fixed and unchanging. But in many native communities, knowledge was carried in a different way. It lived in people. Stories were passed down from elders to the younger ones. Lessons were shared through words, through actions, and through everyday life. Nothing had to be written down to be important. It was remembered. And because it was remembered, it stayed alive. It could grow. It could adjust. It could speak to new situations while still holding on to the past. Spiritual life wasn't something stored in pages. It moved with the people. It was shaped by their experiences. It continued through each generation. It didn't just exist outside of them. It lived within them. Number 7. Misunderstanding changed history. Because many Europeans did not recognize these ways of life as religion, they often dismissed them. Some saw them as simple or undeveloped. Others believed they should be replaced. And over time, this led to pressure on many native communities. Sometimes strong pressure, sometimes force, to give up their traditions and adopt new ones. Ways of life were interrupted. Practices were pushed aside. Generations were affected. But the truth is, what they failed to see was never actually missing. It was just different from what they expected. These traditions still held meaning. They still carried deep understanding. They simply did not fit into the definitions Europeans were used to. So the misunderstanding didn't just cause confusion. It helped shape history itself. Number 8. Prayer could be action. Before a hunt, there might be a quiet moment of thanks. Before taking something from the earth, a small gift might be given in return. Before speaking, a person might pause, thinking carefully about their words. These actions may not have looked like formal prayer. There were no fixed speeches, no strict steps to follow, but they still carried deep meaning. They were about connection, a steady, ongoing relationship between people and the world around them. It wasn't something done once in a while. It was part of everyday life. And because of that, any action, no matter how small, could become meaningful. It could become something special. Closing reflection. Maybe prayer was never meant to look one way. Maybe it was never meant to be confined to words, places, or specific moments. And maybe what Europeans failed to recognize was not the absence of religion, but the presence of something deeper. Because in the end, prayer is not just what you say. It's how you live, how you relate, how you exist within the world around you. And sometimes, the most powerful form of prayer isn't spoken at all. But what you've seen here is only one fragment of the truth. The next layer goes even deeper than this. Thanks for watching. Mode Hub Tales brings untold history to life. Subscribe now to uncover more hidden stories that shaped the world.